Hi, welcome to this video. Today, we're going to be talking about Sea of Stars and the whole experience of the game in co-op. So, Sea of Stars is an old school inspired JRPG with, pixel graphics and turn-based combat, so it's nothing too new. The game itself came out 2023, so it's pretty fresh. Me and my best friend decided to actually play this game co-op. Now, the game only has local co-op, so I got the game and we're using Parsec, a computer streaming service to play with each other. It's similar to Steam Remote Play, but we actually prefer the streaming settings that Parsec offers, and I personally don't really like Steam Remote Play. It's usually just really bitratey and weird, and it just never works out in my opinion. So just imagine that we're basically playing local co-op while not sitting next to each other. I'm using a controller and my friend is using a keyboard. Is this important? Maybe, we'll see. But we have finished the game and give or take gotten every single collectible and secret item in the game. We even got the true ending of the game, which you have to get in New Game Plus. That doesn't mean we replayed the game in New Game Plus, it just means that we got the secret ending. And I'm not gonna tell you what it is or how to get it because it's a secret true ending. So you know what, you wanna find out? You find out. We played on a pretty hard difficulty, not the hardest, but I will explain exactly how difficulty is set up in the game because it's a bit different than easy, medium, hard. But that being said, it all took us about 40-ish hours to beat the whole game, or at least to do what we did, and it's pretty lengthy for at least what you pay. It's like 34 euros, $34. But with that being said, let's actually talk about the game and the gameplay. The gameplay isn't anything complicated. After all, if you're playing on a keyboard, you're actually only using your left hand. The game is divided into different settings. It's combat and open world running, and then overworld running. And in the open world part, you kinda run around and you interact with items and you talk to NPC. And it's very basic. You run around or you interact with items or you fight enemies. You will later unlock some more abilities and interactive actions. These are actions like you can manipulate time of day, you can use a gust of wind to push things around or to push enemies around, you can use a grappling hook for traversal, for puzzles, and for enemy engaging. And all these are usually applied to either map traversal or some sort of puzzle, like I said. As soon as you unlock it, it kind of becomes relevant for the rest of the game. So you unlock initially time of day manipulation, and that's going to be relevant throughout the whole game. Same with the gust that pushes things around. As soon as you unlock it, it becomes relevant. Grappling, you unlock it, relevant. It's not like it's a function that you can use it if you wish. No, it is actually relevant throughout the whole game and you have to use it. Then there are the enemies, as I've been saying. To engage enemies, you either 1. Run into them, 2. Attack them for some damage and engage the fight, or 3. Grapple into them, which will damage them and engage the fight from a distance, if you so wish. So, how does the combat work? Well, the game is turn-based, as I said, and the party consists of 3 active characters and whatever amount of enemies there are. The enemies are usually either opposite of the player characters or sandwiching the party. You'll see in the video. You can see, yeah. Imagine that the party has a circular radius and enemies can spawn somewhere on that circle. You'll notice that in the gameplay that enemies just jump around sometimes and have different positions. And it's like a whole clock mechanic, and the enemy can be anywhere on that clock arm, so to say. That means that every time the enemies are going to have different positions, it's going to vary the gameplay a bit, and they're not necessarily going to be next to each other unless you force them to. In general, the combat is quite interesting and interactive in my opinion. You got the choices of, normal attacks, skills, combo moves which involve 2 different party members, ultimate, and each attack has its own attribute/element. You got the base attributes like slash or blunt damage, but there's also elements like solar, lunar, poison, arcane. And every enemy has its own vulnerability so that you can exploit and use different tactics and strategies for each enemy and abilities. So elements come into play very early, honestly, and they become very relevant on actually beating the enemies, because some enemies are super resistant to magic attacks of any kind, Some enemies are very resistant to any basic attacks of slash or blunt, so you have to figure out exactly what to do, so it makes the game a bit more interesting on having to actually use your brain. And I mentioned that the combat is interactive, and you might wonder how so, because it's a turn-based game. Well, every time you use any action against any enemy, you have to time it properly for maximum damage. Meaning that if you basic attack an enemy, which is a simple slash attack for example, before the character lands the hit, you have to simply press spacebar for keyboard, A button for my Xbox controller. If you time it right, it does more damage. If you don't, you do base damage. Some skills are more intensive and require you to do more of a succession of button presses, or like spam it. It's like an endurance test. For example, it's a boomerang that goes back and forth towards the enemy and you have to hit the boomerang every time it hits you to do the maximum amount of damage. And it becomes a very fun rhythmic way of timing, and it becomes quite interesting. This also applies to when defending enemy attacks. If you time the defense right, you take less damage. If you don't, you take the full damage. And every enemy usually has their own rhythms, their own button mashes, their own interesting, timings, so that when you meet a new enemy, which you do pretty often in my opinion, and they throw around the enemy timings, it's gonna make the game feel more on edge. It's not just, oh, I used my attack, my turn is over, let's wait for them to do their thing, oh, their turn is over, my turn. No, you kind of gotta keep on your toes, you gotta be interactive with your attacks, and you gotta be ready to defend on their attacks too. Thus, this button timing function makes the game more interactive. And since we're playing co-op, both of our inputs is required for full damage or full defense. And it's displayed on the bottom right side of the game, which player misses or succeeds a timing. So that means half the bonus is applied and that one missed. And then you can have, some fun banter, or it could lead to some tiny toxic behavior. It's still fun in the end. But that's kinda all for gameplay. You either run around or you do combat. Really, it's that simple. So let's talk about that difficulty that I mentioned before. The game's difficulty revolves around this on and off mechanic called relics. You start off with a few relics, and they are basically game modifiers that you can toggle on or off. Some of these are, for example, healing after battle, double HP in general, taking 40% more damage, enemies being more resistant, some accessibility things like showing that your timing is correct visually, and plenty of other relics too. So there's a variety of them, and you can freely toggle them on or off as long as you're out of combat. Some of these are sold in shops, some of them are found in the world by exploring. And you gotta somehow earn some of these, and some of these are really good. They give you buffs sometimes, or make the game more interesting in some ways. And you gotta earn them, rather than just have the option right off the gate. And these also serve as difficulty. So we didn't really play with every single hard modifier that makes the game harder or tougher, because we didn't think the game was going to be fun at a certain point, and we didn't want it to be a slog either. So we didn't turn them all on. We didn't want it to be like brutal and unfun. Maybe if you enjoy it, you can pull on all the harder stuff and do a hard run. If not, I would just recommend you play the game the way you want to play. Toggle whatever you want to toggle, It makes the game a bit customizable, and that's fun. And it doesn't feel like you're doing this whole like custom sandbox whole thing. Instead, it makes you kind of feel like you're choosing to add difficulty if you so feel the need for it. I wouldn't say that the game is hard in general, at least not for me. To get a game over, you'd have to get all your 3 active playable characters knocked down at the same time. As long as at least one party member lived on the battlefield, you could keep going and others could get back up after a few turns. But overall, we only had 3 game overs throughout the whole playthrough, and that's not that many. But let's move on to the story. Since this is a JRPG, it's also a very story-heavy game. It's not voice-acted, so there's a lot of text dialogue, and you can either read it or skip it completely. It's up to you, really. I would though definitely recommend you don't skip it. It's going to make the story very confusing. There is no mission guide, so you low-key have to read the last few conversation boxes to actually understand where you're going and what you're doing. Because sometimes we didn't, and we got lost. So we stopped doing that and we started reading the whole story. But as I said, if you've never played this game, I would not advise you skipping because you're going to be missing out on basically half the game in that case. Don't even bother playing the game if you don't like text. That's all I'm going to say. We struggled a bit with the text part. It was a bit too much. We would have liked less text in general because there was a bit too much text to read and go through. But it wasn't deathly boring or anything like that. I won't be covering too much of the story here. I will not be talking about detail. You can buy and play the game yourself to experience all of that. I still think it's about a 7 out of 10 story. 6 out of 10. It was fine. Not the most unique, but whatever. But let's talk about the premise so you know at least what the premise of the story is. You play as two Solstice warriors, Zale and Valerie. Valerie? Look, names in this game can be very hard to pronounce. Just keep that in mind too. But these Solstice warriors are magical warriors that have the power of either the sun or the moon. It depends if they were born in the winter or in the summer. You are also accompanied by their best friend Garl, a very energetic and wholesome fighting cook. The goal of the Solstice warriors is to fight back these demonic things called Dwellers. The Dwellers can only be defeated by Solstice warriors during a solar eclipse. That's when the Dweller is weak, and that's only when you can defeat the Dweller. So that's kind of the basics of the story, really. You later pick up more companions and party members, so the whole party grows and you get to know all the companions and exactly what happens to them and who they are and yada yada yada, you know, you get it. And you adventure together basically to save the world. That's kind of it. It's a pretty standard storytelling game, you know. It's nothing crazy, it's nothing new. You got this big bad group of heroes, they save the world, bada bing bada boom. Kind of child-friendly game, really. But honestly, that's kind of it for the whole game. The game is simple and it's pretty much the same over and over again with some slight differences. I would in general also describe the game very slow paced. The story takes a while to pick up and so does the combat. It's a slow burn throughout the whole cycle of the game, both with gameplay and story. Abilities such as combos or ultimates are unlocked pretty late into the game. Like we'd have to get about 10 hours in to get an ultimate, as I said, and maybe 5 or so hours to get a new skill and several hours to get even a new combo to one of your characters. Even when you unlock new characters, they don't always come with combos. So you gotta find the combos and learn the combos and whatnot. So yeah, it's a slow game. And it's a game that is more about the journey rather than the destination, so to say. It's how you get there. And it does feel like you're growing throughout playing the game. You learn these abilities and you go through the characters and the characters develop, slowly becoming Solstice warriors properly, you know, wielding their power, using their magic and getting stronger. And it does feel like you are going through a journey with these young Solstice warriors that you see grow up and then become adult and then they're strong. It does feel like you're actually growing as a character. But there's co-op, as we've clearly stated. And the co-op is not really co-op-y. So let's talk a bit about that too. What you do when you start the game, you assign controls to each player and what character each player is going to be playing. There are two main characters that can be in the player 1 slot. You can't be anyone else if you're player 1 except the main characters, which is Zale and Valerie. Any other character can be in player 2 or player 3 as long as Zale or Valerie is in the first spot. After you assign the controls, everyone can move around everywhere basically, except it's kind of restricted to player 1's actions and position. Now anyone can open chests, pick up ingredients and engage enemies, and everyone is going to get sucked into the battle. You know, you can go into a cave / push on to the next area. Everyone can do that. But if you need to interact with the lever, do something specific with some item or take an elevator, there's going to be a cogwheel symbol that pops up. It's going to go do a clicky sound like click, look, look, clack, click, basically prompting every player to be present to trigger it. Yes, every player has to be present. Luckily, we were only 2 people, so only one of us had to be there. But if there's 3, I bet it would have been way more annoying. And this makes the game feel weird. It makes it extra sluggish. Like, why do I have to have someone's help to flick a lever or push a button? Like a tiny ass button. It's tiny. It's create this unnecessary moment of having to wait for each other, and it just makes it feel so unnecessary. Then there's also the whole camera and the out of bounds bubble. Basically, the camera only follows player 1 when exploring. Anything or anywhere, it's just player 1 centered. If you walk too far away, then you get a timer and eventually you go into a bubble that teleports you to the first player. Even if it's a cutscene that is too long, the other players will get an out of bounds timer and eventually get teleported back to player 1. You're in a cutscene. You're getting out of bounds in a cutscene. It's pretty stupid, but at least during combat, it's not as bad. But it doesn't feel like we're actually controlling our chosen character either. Because there is no dedicated characters for player 1 or 2 or 3. Instead, anyone can use the ability of any party member. You'll see in the VOD that when we pick, we can just, mouse over any character that has not had their turn yet. So the game feels a bit more like passing on the controller to the other player rather than playing it co-op, so to say. Except that you both have a controller and it's like hot seat but with extra step. Now, is this really that big of a problem? No, not really, I wouldn't say so. The game is still pretty damn fun and it is enjoyable. But these features, they are annoying, yeah, and they could absolutely be better and honestly just not be there in general. And there's a lot, and I'll tell you, a lot of interactable objects. Like, you have to have every party member present quite often. And this makes it super annoying, and it just prolongs the gameplay for no reason. Like, it's just stupid annoying, But the linearity of the game makes split exploration not even an option, because everyone follows player 1 anyways. The maps aren't really open, as I said earlier. They are very linear, with a very few paths diverging here and there. There are still some puzzles that would have been so much more streamlined with more than one person being at each button or pressure plate or lever. The amount of times that we wanted to do a puzzle quickly, because the puzzles aren't hard. There are very few hard puzzles in the game. And the simple puzzles are so simple that you just want to split up and do them super fast because like, oh, this is here, this goes here, that goes there, that goes there. There you go, boom, you're done. But the game makes you both be in the same location every time, so you're just running back and forth in a stupid way, and it's just stupid. So I kind of wondered at times if it would have been a better experience to play solo, because the game mostly feels like it's developed to be solo, and then kind of added a half-baked co-op. But I really liked the whole timing thing. Honestly, the timing thing of skills made the game so much more fun than if it would have been playing it solo. Obviously, it would have felt cool to time things yourself, but it's also really fun to see you and your friend do different timings and mess up, and you can roast each other and blame each other or commend each other and be like, whoa, you actually hit that, that's crazy, You can have good banter because of the timing system, and I really like it. But I'm going to be real now. Neither me or my friend would have actually played this game by ourselves. That's why I never picked up this game. I've known this game since early access, I think. Actually, since the demo came out. I remember I tried the demo a year or so ago. But I didn't pick it up because I kind of knew that I wouldn't play this game by myself. JRPG is a genre that I haven't played since I was a kid. And it's not that the games are bad or anything, that's not what I'm saying. I just think it's not my cup of tea to play solo. But we still had a good time playing the game together, and I do think it is a good game. But I think the co-op did a lot of heavy lifting, even though it was so ass in reality. But as I said, the game is kind of rinse and repeat, with some plot throughout the whole game. The story does the heavy lifting, and there is a lot of story to the game. If there was only gameplay, I would have probably clicked off really fast on this game. But the variety doesn't really do it. Visually, the game is really cool. All the skills are super neat and you feel the impact. The audio visual effects are super nice. It's an enjoyable experience. And I think playing it with friends makes it a way better time too. Hell, play it with your partner or your children even. It is a good time, I think, for everyone. Because it's just fun. Does it have flaws? Yeah, absolutely it does. but don't let that dissuade you because there aren't many of these games out there. These sort of co-op games are kind of rare nowadays, honestly. Linear story-based games. I wish there were more of them that are just, you and someone you like playing games with, and you're not playing it for the grind or the online experience, just for the gameplay and the story, just for the experience of the game. It's really nice. And we don't have much of that lately. Maybe I'm being nostalgic, but if you got any similar recommendations, throw them my way in the comments. I'd really appreciate it, and I'd make a video on them probably too. But I think that's all for me, really. Let me know if I missed anything about the game in the comments. If not, let's talk about it down there in the comments. What are your thoughts on the game? Have you played it, or do you plan on playing it? You like JRPGs in general? Is this something that you feel is nostalgic or not? Let me know. As always, thank you so much for watching. Consider leaving a like and subscribing. I'm a small channel and I like making videos of games and I like talking about them. But thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.